Okay, this video right here is going to be introduction to belt drives. All right. So a few things that I'm going to go ahead and get started with is talking about certain components. Like for instance, we have what some people call a pulley, or it's spelled a sheave or shiv. Okay, so all of those are kind of sort of correct. There's a lot of debate on what this is, a pulley or a shiv or a sheave. But suffice it to say, I'll answer to either any of these when you're referring to this, and I'm not going to get into the history and the specifics, but if you look in the dictionary, what's spelled sheave and pronounced shiv versus a pulley, essentially they are described as the same. So we're going to get past that. So we're talking about belt drives with pulleys here or sheaves, and here are some belts. Okay, there's a couple different styles of belts. For example, what you can see right here is a timing belt or a synchronous belt, and you have a V belt here, which is super common, a V belt on most drives. You can get some slippage more so with this. Obviously, this right here eliminates a lot of that slippage that you find in belt systems, but there's a bit of a cushion because this is made out of usually polyester cords or steel cords and rubber. So it's nice to a nice kind of in between a rigid chain drive and a belt drive that can slip. So we have that. There's also flat belts that are essentially, they look like this, both sides, and don't necessarily have the teeth on there. So again, just a few different types. Also too, this is what the corresponding sheave or pulley looks like for a timing or synchronous belt right there. We're not going to deal a whole lot with those right now, but we are going to talk about these belts here. Now, if you notice in front of me, I have two different belts, and it may be difficult to see in the video, but this one has a taper, this one has a taper, V belt, okay? So obviously you can see that they're not all created equal, all right? And there are different belts or different sheave profiles or shiv profiles or pulley profiles that you would use depending on your application. Mostly we're concerned with is being able to identify that. So there's a few ways to do that. One is there's some really handy gauges here, and it's hard to see in the camera, but there's 6V, 5V, 4V. And then you have the A, B, C, D, and E, the English or Imperial. You can use this to actually see what the belt series is. With this gauge, it's a little bit above the V, or the B, I'm sorry, B as in boy. And so I'm going to say that's a B, and I know that actually because I have the tag on here, it's a B42. So it's a B, and then the length of it is actually a 42 as far as the circumference. So that's kind of how to measure that. Also, too, it's good to be able to know how to read calipers, and using the calipers to measure here, this is essentially 0.650, a little bit bigger than 5/8, 0.625, which is indicative, again, of a B-size belt. And then, of course, there is the section thickness that you should be able to measure with that. So you need to learn how to measure those things, and it's good. Now, when it comes to the actual pulley profiles or sheave profiles, there's also tools for that. And there are so many more tools for that than there are for the belts. That's because there are many different angles. Like I'm looking here, I'm seeing 40 degrees, 36 degrees, 40, 36, and then of course an abundance of profiles. So when you're checking this, not only are you checking for the size, but also the angle. So what fits in there angularly, as far as the included angle, and fits in with the appropriate amount of depth. So that's how we identify these pulleys or sheaves in a pulley system. So along with that, there are many different ways to mount these pulleys. For example, this particular one right here is just a solid bore with a key in there, and then of course it has somewhere around here a place for a set screw to tighten this down to a shaft. This works, okay, just like sprockets, it works, but this is a superior method right here. This is a taper lock bushing. Okay, so we're going to talk about taper lock bushings here again in other videos, along with this video series on how this works, because this looks a little different than what we did with the chains, but that's okay. This mate here helps to grab the shaft a little harder, and we'll get beyond that. All right, so what essentially we're going to do is we're going to learn a little bit about these and what the different types are. We're going to figure out how to mount this up, talk about shaft alignment, talk about tension of the belts, and then also a little bit about the ratios.